Hey everyone, let's try and get this Crazyhouse session recording. So I'm Grandmaster Slingworth, and this is me streaming me playing my Crazyhouse tournament, and hopefully it actually works. Well, we can certainly test it and find out. And if so, then it can make a nice series to people enjoy me playing some Crazyhouse as a variant from playing like normal chess. You know, it's one I won my first game against a 2-2-60 guy, so it's always fun. It looks like now I'm waiting to play the next person. The game's taking forever, but I think I'm getting a 2-2-60 guy next. So let's play really fast and see what happens from there. Okay then. That's kind of surprising, but there we go. Let's just play really quickly and try to get something in on d3. Okay, that's nice. I can even sack on like f2 and just go for an attack that way. Can try to trade the queens. Actually, I'll go e4 first, and then bishop c5 will be a lot better. He can try to attack me with h6, but fortunately he's not doing that. And yeah, now things are looking pretty good. I just have to make sure I don't get mated. Bishop g4 check. To bring the knight to c6 or something. To prepare knight to d4. Oh, he's giving me mate. I think, yeah, mate in 2. Okay, so that was easy enough. Can check to see. I think, yeah, that worked. Yeah, you can see the game. So, yeah, that's all good news. Unfortunately, it doesn't really show the ball window when it switches for some weird reason. But, okay, we'll figure it out. Maybe there's a little bit of a lag between the window and where it shows. Anyway, yeah, it was a nice quick win against low-rated player. Okay, yeah, now we know it's working. So, let's play. I'll try not to talk much in this game. Yeah, blundered a pawn like an idiot, but oh well. Okay, bishop f5. Oh, he's letting me get the pawn back. That's nice. Go d3. Try to put something on g5 maybe. He's trying to stop that. Yeah, it's a passive opening on my part, but oh, it's okay. Go f6. I think this play's not that strong. Might go rook g4 or something. Put a pawn on f6. Okay, now we're talking. Now this is good. Yeah, I'll take knight f6. Just winning lots of stuff. Just a matter of playing it quickly now. Maybe put the knight back here. And maybe bishop here. Just go for some attack. Just trade stuff. This should be good. Just sack and go for mate. I think fast enough play should be all well and good. Kind of lost a lot of momentum, but at least you're getting a lot of time on the clock from this. Can sack here as well to bring my queen in the attack. Knight at g5. Put a pawn on h7, and I think we're good to go. Don't make sure there aren't any tricks. Okay, now I can just queen and it should be over. Yeah, he's playing too slowly as well, which is kind of a problem for him. Can even pre-move this actually. He doesn't really have a good defense to the mate. Okay, that was nice to beat him like that. Let's see who we have up next. One advantage of berserking that you get one more point for each win and on a streak. So yeah, it's a good feeling. Probably get a heat dog next. Oh no, but most of these guys are paused. So yeah, that's kind of could be a bit of a wait. I'll probably get Satura, except they're playing. So yeah, I don't actually have an opponent to play against. And if I don't get someone in next 1 minute, then yeah, I'm probably just going to stop it. Looks like I will get someone, maybe Varun. I don't know. Yeah, one thing with the arena is also you can play the same opponent multiple times, so it's not like a Swiss tournament in that way, and people can join and pause whenever they want. So yeah, looks like I get a new opponent. That's cool. Let's pre-move knight f6, pre-move d5, because why not? Because the idea is like if e5, you can kind of sack a pawn, or sack a piece for good compensation. Yeah, I mean, it's actually not such a bad piece sack for me. I get to weaken his king and stuff, and well, guy doesn't seem to be that strong, which is an added bonus. So, yeah, he's running into all sorts of hurt now, assuming he doesn't have d7 with mate, but okay, he didn't see it. So, yeah, now we're all good. I think this is pretty much forced mate once I figure out how. I don't really see how yet, so I'm just going to take the material and win. Of course, I missed mate in one, but I missed mate in one again, but okay, now we get there, finally. So, okay, let's see who we have next as our next opponent. Probably Satura, because Satura's not playing anyone. And we have the usual long wait for the next game. But I'll be white in the next one, probably. We'll see how it goes. I mean, it's an advantage to be white in Crazyhouse, like, you know, because you can drop pieces down the board. It does give you a bit more to use with that initiative. But on the other hand, yeah, you also, with black, you get chances as well if you're creative enough. I'll go bishop c4, d4, why not? Let's play it aggressively. Bishop b3, put a knight f5 or pawn at e6 maybe. That I'm kind of happy to see, just pawn at f3. Put a pawn on e6 and just attack. Should be pretty good, I think. Put pawn on e6 again. Can always take and pawn at f7, get some momentum that way. But this is even better for me because now my rook gets in the attack. Pawn e6 I probably just take. So yeah, it looks pretty bad for him. Bishop d5, I can just grab a pawn for my attack. b8, I might just take again because I can. And then pawn at f5, just sack material but get a big attack for it. Okay. Bishop on d5 or pawn at f5 is actually really nice too. I'll go. I'm sacking a rook, but I get pretty good compensation actually with f5. So I can put a lot of pieces against that, like bishop at h3 and stuff. And he's sinking quite a lot, which is nice. Yeah, I'll take. Put a knight. Oh, okay, I'll take that. Put a knight on d7, and I think he's just busted then. Because king 8, bishop f7, mate. And he's trying to defend, but I can just take here. And put the queen here next move. She doesn't have a defense force, so... Okay, it was nice to beat this 2-3-7-6 guy. I'm on a good roll here. Probably end up getting Varun again. Not quite sure. I mean, like, with this, I mean, a part of me is tempted, like, because it takes so long to get a game that, you know, I might just stop after the next one. Like, just close the tournament and say, okay, this was a short stream to see how to win in Crazyhouse. You know, like, even spend time, like, going through some of the previous games I played and, you know, talking through my thought process a bit more because, obviously, Berserker with 30 seconds is not so easy to do that. So, probably end up getting X-Mohax again, actually. But he's in a game. But I can't get Satura because I played him just before, so... Okay, I'll wait another 10 seconds and, like, if I don't get another opponent, then I probably will just stop. Because there aren't enough players in this tournament, like, to be worth the wait of playing. So, yeah, I'm just going to stop because I think I've, like, got the tournament in the bag anyway, even if I don't play anymore, even though I only played for, like, 5 minutes or so. So, okay, what I'll do is, like, for the rest of this this video, I'm just going to, like, talk through those games I played so you can see how I won. I don't really use Lead Chess much, like, for the sort of live videos like this, so I'm just going to find my games and let's see. Let's go out with like the one I played at the start, just go in chronological order. So I think you can all see this this game here. This is the one I played, yeah, if I wasn't sure if the stream was working properly or not, but now we can have a look. This one, yeah, maybe I can actually use the analysis board because it would be interesting to actually compare my thought process with what the computer gives, because I never actually bothered to analyze my Crazyhouse games with the engine, but it could actually be very insightful in learning how to actually win in Crazyhouse. So let's do that. I'm debating whether I should have this opening Explorer open or not. Yeah, I think I will, because it'll be good to kind of see the opening theory and see how to actually play, you know, how players better than me at Crazyhouse have approached similar positions. So okay, I think this is a pretty good setup. So we have e4. So this was the first game with d5, and you know I pre-moved d5 just because. And after, it's enough after d5. Yeah, I actually didn't realize the computer likes e5 better, that it scores better for white. That could be something for me to explore because, you know, we know we'll see in normal chess it's a bad idea to let black take the whole center, but you know maybe grabbing the space in Crazyhouse is not the dumbest idea in the world. Well, after e5, my opponent played knight f6, and again in normal chess you wouldn't play knight c3 because it blocks in the pawn. On c2, but in Crazyhouse you often don't want to push your c pawn because then you're weakening for drops on the c2 square. And a similar reason why I don't push the f pawn early in Crazyhouse in general, because then you weaken the f2 square and there can be some nasty drops with a pawn or knight there. So after knight f5, d5 has developed normally with knight f3. And yeah, the most solid move for black is e6, but in playing that you're kind of accepting quite a passive position. It is something I have done in different games with black, but I have to admit my results have not been particularly great. So my opponent played knight c3, bc3, and yeah, bishop g4 is a move that you often see these kind of like players who are, let's say, strong but not super strong play. Because the problem with bishop g4 is that you're weakening b7, but you're also opening yourself up to knight e5 moves. And I mean, if I hadn't been sort of berserking, I probably would have played knight at e5 and, you know, just gone knight f7 and just piled everything up against that f7 point. But okay, I more or less almost semi-pre-move bishop c4. And it's also a pretty decent move, even though the move my opponent played does reduce my advantage a bit, where he played knight at d6. And yeah, after knight d6, I mean, it's a position where obviously his f7 pawn is still a weakness, but I think it's important to try to fight for the initiative, and so the move I played of knight e5 is quite an important one, because it means that if he plays knight c4, well, I can go for... I was going to play knight takes g4 and simply drop, like, the knight back on e5 and, put stuff on e6, f7. It's a pretty strong attack, and I think very hard for black to deal with. And the computer points out the knight f7 is also very strong, but from a human perspective is a bit more messy for both sides. So the idea of knight f7, by the way, is if king takes it, or you go knight g5, and once you can like drop a pawn f7 and get the queen in the attack, it's pretty clear that black's king is going to get mated. Like as you play more and more Crazyhouse, you get a feel for when the attack is like sufficient to mate and when you can defend. But it's not one of the positions that black can defend. Well, he played bishop at h5, and I kind of just intuitively thought surely like sacking f7 must be very good here. Because then obviously I'm hitting the queen, and if he plays bishop f7, well, it kind of ends up being similar to the game. I mean, if he plays king takes, I can just lure the king. I was going to play like knight e5 and put something on e6 and f7, and again the black king is just way too exposed. I can even like just play moves of trade pieces just to like say if I trade a knight with a pawn f7, I can then drop another knight on e5 and there are less defenders for the black king there. Well, in the game he played knight takes f7, and okay, I missed a nice tactic with knight e5, going for the very beautiful Legal's mate idea. Fortunately, the move I pre-moved or semi-pre-moved a pawn to e6 is still completely winning, where I'm just going to drop a piece on f7 and get the mating material by force when I have to take. So he tried to swindle with knight f4, but I played ef7, king d7, and obviously with 30 seconds on the clock, you can see that even though I've played more than twice as quickly as my opponent so far, it still has taken me, it's hard to play a lot quite fast to make sure I get flagged. So obviously I pre-moved knight to e5, king c8, and this is an instructive moment of the game actually, because I see a lot of players, be very afraid to give up their queen in Crazyhouse, but it's actually a very sensible idea because in this case you are getting two pieces for it with knight h5, and I played bishop g4, which is probably not the best idea. I played too much for material in this case. And after pawn at d7, I mean, I admittedly did not see my opponent's next move. Otherwise, I probably would have gone castles and, put a pawn e6 and just applied on the pressure on the d7 point. Instead, I took, and, it's still a decent move, but I did miss the move queen e4 as a rather unpleasant fork. Luckily for me, I had some good fortune where, with my move knight at e3, it is true I sort of play a knight that I didn't necessarily have to put on the board, but it is kind of nice to put my material on the board as well. And now instead of playing queen e5, where, I mean, the position would still be technically winning for white, because I do have my big lead in development, and a lot more piece to attack the light squares and black has to defend it, which is very important here. But on the other hand, the thing is that I would also be much further behind on the clock, so I'd have to play very fast and very well in order to win this, especially against a player rate 2-2-6-5 like my opponent. But instead he pre-moved queen g2, and once I have the queen, it's kind of over. It's just a matter of good technique. And I just basically played attacking moves pretty much every move. I should have played queen at e8, that would have been a faster win, but fortunately pawn e6 is also decisive, and after kind of playing these moves, I just gained pieces off the board by force. Well, after queen bishop at g4, luckily he doesn't have a queen in the hand to threaten queen d1 mate. So it meant I could play queen at e8 and just force the material off the board to win. So bishop d7, and a nice little checkmate with take. Knight at e6, and I just pre-moved queen at e8, because you see I only had 7 seconds on the clock. If king c8, of course, queen at d8 is a couple of moves faster, but the fact that pre-move everything is an added bonus here. So after bishop e6, queen e8, it was just a checkmate. So that was kind of a fun game to play. I just completely outplayed my opponent, and it's funny because I used to always listen to music when playing Crazyhouse, but after my performance in these games, just winning game after game without listening to music, maybe I shouldn't listen to it. It's maybe I'll just be 100, 200 points stronger at this variant, just not listening to music. So there you go. So let's take the next game, where this one, was against a quite low-rate player, and I mean, immediately to some my decision, this game was probably not that great, but luckily I was still able to win it anyway. So let's have a quick look at it. So after I berserked, my opponent just tried to play very safe and played, the move e3 here. And I just played knight f6, just keeping flexible. And after bishop c4, d5, obviously he doesn't have his idea of playing bishop f7, which isn't really a good idea anyway. I mean, this isn't Bughouse. You actually have to take the opponent's pieces to be able to drop those pieces on the board. But anyway, yeah, I should probably just play e5, but I played e6 as a kind of to be able to pre-move the next moves. So I had c4, and again you see c4 white's a mistake because after these pawns get traded, now I'm ready to drop something in on d3 and potentially drop something on c2, and the whole light squares are very weak for white. So after d3 castles, I actually pre-moved pawn at e4 here, just thinking, well, I need to get the space and try to get a pawn chain going to constrict the opponent's pieces. Because very often in Crazyhouse, if you can get a good pawn chain attack on one color complex, it can be very difficult for your opponent to deal with that in the long term. But he played e4 and just kind of committed suicide. So takes, and after knight f3, moves like knight takes f2, I knew that it was objectively not the best move, but because I could tell my opponent was very low rated, I figured I would be able to take advantage of that. But you can see I pre-move virtually every move, because I start with 30 seconds, I still have 29.3 seconds here. Of course, yeah, dropping a pawn h3 would be more precise, because that way I can, meet gh3 with pawn at g2, and really you can sort of see here that this pawn just completely ties up the, the white position. Okay, there are much better moves than bishop takes h3, like bishop to b4, but, you get the idea that this is a very unplayable position for white as such. Okay, fortunately after knight f2, my original idea was to play bishop to c5, but I realized that pawn at d4 would then block my attack on the plan of trading queens for the attack. So that's why I played pawn at e4 first, because it both allows me to get a knight that I can then drop to attack the king, and also means I can then play bishop c5 without fearing d4. So after knight g5, I played bishop to c5, and the attack kind of plays itself from here. I played takes, and okay, I missed a faster mate. I was trying to play really fast to sort of keep up on the clock. Fortunately, bishop g4 is still pretty good, and here I did actually find a fastest mate, queen d3, king e1, and pawn f2 checkmate. So if you are new to Crazyhouse, you can see it's actually pretty easy to win with it. Just play normal, healthy developing moves like normal chess, and then just bring the piece in the attack as quickly as possible, the way players like Morphy and Greco have done. Because, one thing with the romantic era of chess is that, back then, people did tend to play in this kind of style in normal chess, but then as defensive skill got a lot higher, it wasn't really possible to do so anymore. So if you kind of like that kind of very aggressive play, then Crazyhouse actually gives you the kind of the material, the fuel to actually be able to play in a very romantic spirit, and it's very aggressive and dynamic, much like games like Shogi, for example, where you have a similar concept of piece on being able to convert in a better value piece or being able to drop certain pieces on the board at certain moments. In any case, let's have a look at the next game, where this one, I was playing against the another player right around 2-250, and I realized that it would probably be a tough game, but I ended up managing to get the better of it despite watching the opening a little bit, where, okay, we had the analysis board. I'll just get that so you can see it. So after e4, I basically pre-moved knight f3, sort of gambling he wouldn't play knight f6, but as it turns out he did. But it was kind of funny, because I normally play knight c3 in this position. Or actually, that's not entirely true. I often play to move e5, in fact, with the idea that if they go d5, that I'll sort of play d4 and actually not take that knight on f6, because if you take, you sort of give black a very easy scheme of development, and the pawn sort of actually helps defend the king. So black actually gets sort of reasonable compensation for the piece, and this is what I play as black in Crazyhouse as well. So it's better actually to play d4 and just kind of keep the tension and keep the space. Because after knight c6, you also have bishop b5, and if black does bring the knight in, you can go knight e2 and end up later winning that knight with moves like f3 in a much better version than if you're giving up your powerful e5 pawn, because that space really helps you to go for an attack on the dark squares later in the game. So in any case, admittedly I haven't really found a fully sufficient answer to this from black's perspective. Probably d6 is one of the better tries, but then white can sort of take, and you basically get the line we saw before, but with an extra tempo for white, which does really help a lot. There was a match between what was a guy's name, Jasugi, against Oppowezen, where they played this in a lot of games, and I kind of picked up a lot of good ideas from white's perspective from watching that match. Remember, they played knight c3, bishop b4, and Jasugi went for this setup with knight f4 and bishop e2. Because typically the problem white faces in these lines is that when the knight goes to f3, they put a pawn at h3 and kind of just weaken the white king in advance. With the knight f4, you kind of cover against that, and that makes it much harder for black to get his usual attacking ideas going. So that's a bit about the opening theory of knight to f6, because I'm not sure if we'll get another chance to cover it in this depth in this video. But anyway, in the game I played knight f3, and thankfully my opponent did not play the move knight takes e4. Instead he played d5, but because I was sure he was going to play knight e4, I actually pre-moved the move knight to c3. Obviously, the move e5 or even ed5 would be considerably stronger here and would keep the advantage for white. But okay, after knight c3, he played d4, and I was very surprised actually by the next moves, because I was absolutely sure that he was just going to defend his pawn with a move like bishop f5, because then there's no way to really, I think, justify white's play. You know, bishop c4, e6 brings my attack very much to a dead end, but I would kind of have to admit that my play was a failure. I mean, e6, yeah, it still actually turns out to be a good move, but I mean, black is still better, but I think that his edge is much smaller than in the other lines, because, yeah, on the one hand, he has more space, and, you know, with knight 6, he stopped me playing d4, but at least my position kind of, like, is a bit more sensible than it was before. Actually, it's kind of funny, because the computer points out that actually I could have played d4 as a pawn sack, and I think the idea behind it is that if black does take it, which probably shouldn't do, but just if he does take, like, knight takes, well, then I can sort of then, you know, play bishop e3, you know, maybe put a pawn on c3. I want to put a pawn at c3. It's kind of important, because if you play c3, like in normal chess, then a knight goes at c2, and that's really bad for white. Actually, yeah, in this case, yeah, maybe it's kind of interesting how the computer contradicts some of my ideas, but yeah, the idea of playing bishop c4 and attacking this f7 point with all the pieces is definitely very sensible. And yeah, I mean, white would have good practical chances here. I think probably it's much easier to play on in practice, even though the computer is saying that with knight d6 you can maintain the balance by, you know, trading off some of these pieces and making some good exchanges. But yeah, I like white's chances. You know, I just want to show this line because it's kind of instructive to see the idea of knight h5, where in a lot of the crazy house positions, like playing knight h5 and pawn h6 is a typical way to target g7, because like that's the easiest pawn to get at in most lines after a castle. So it's good to see this idea so that you can implement it in your own games as well. Well, the game saw d3, and I actually thought he was going to protect my knight with something like pawn at f5 or maybe pawn at d5, because I thought that my knight doesn't really have a great square to go to, but on the other hand, if I try knight g5 and try to get a knight in, the problem is that I can't easily get one of his other knights to then drop another knight, so my plan just wouldn't really succeed, and you know, if my knights go to a passive square, then black would simply be better. And also, like, my pawn is actually a very good defender as well for when you end up castling short later. So that was why I was kind of expecting him to play, but instead he played bishop e7, which I was kind of happy to see. I mean, I really should have put the pawn at h6 to try and punish the fact that his bishop moved away from covering this square. Because, I mean, after takes and bishop takes, I mean, putting a pawn at g7 and then just playing on those weak dark squares would be very good for me. But okay, I was playing like super fast because I thought, okay, I know I'm playing a good player and I know that I need to gain some time on the clock. So I kind of just played normal developing moves just to, you know, kind of get into the game basically. Unfortunately, my moves were not sort of so bad that they kind of cost me later. Again, yeah, you really should try to defend h6 or go for some counter-attack. I mean, the idea of knight f5 is one that actually is quite a practical move, but yeah, I do have knight at h5 and I am going to be able to, you know, take g7, put pawns on h6 and g7. And it is going to be very unpleasant for black. Not to mention I can also potentially take on trade the knight on f5 and get some extra ammunition for my attack on the dark squares. Like, it's one I found with Crazyhouse, like, I hadn't really thought about it, like, in terms of words, but very often I've noticed, like, when I play Crazyhouse, I actually am playing very much for some sort of light squared strategy or a dark squared strategy. Once you kind of figure out, you know, where your pieces are best positioned to attack, then you kind of pile all the pieces on that color complex and get a very effective attack in that way. So, you know, even I'm learning something from, like, talking about my own games. So, after castles, we had bishop at d7, which, it looks good, but doesn't really do anything. And I took advantage by playing pawn at h6, where, you know, the computer says play the pawn at g6, but allowing that fawn pawn and the possibility for white to potentially get a pawn at g7 is obviously very unpleasant. The problem with g at f6 is that it just brings my bishop in the attack and, you know, gives me, like, this pawn at g7 idea if the rook moves, for example, which is really nasty for black. Because, like, in a position like this, all you need is basically to get a rook or queen, and, I mean, you just win the game on the spot. Okay, it's not as good here, because black can put a knight at f5 and hold, but, you know, you can sort of see how you can put a pawn at g5 and a knight at f6, and then black's not really in a position to be able to cover these squares in the long term. Well, he played knight f5, which is a good practical try, I think, but, you know, he just has too little material, and, okay, I missed the move knight f6 fork, because I thought he was going to play king takes f8. And I ended up playing rook at g4, but fortunately, instead of moving the king away, he played bishop here, and, you know, by putting stuff on f6, I was able to just keep taking his material. And yeah, my technique was not the best, because admittedly I was playing like super fast, trying to just get his pieces, and that's why in some of the next moves my play was a little bit sloppy. Like bishop at f6 would have been a great way to take advantage of his weak dark squares, but I decided to keep a few pieces in hand. So I had knight f6, take, and I put a bishop at h6, just going for, to play on the dark square, just trying to put pieces on the attack. And you see on these next moves, I was kind of just, putting the pieces on the board. Because it's not so useful to have a material advantage if your piece aren't actually playing. So I want to make sure I maximize my material advantage piece actually there. I kind of pre-moved this knight h7 move because I figured even after bishop g8 there would still be not a bad move to play. Just to kind of trade off some of the defenders and have a few more pieces in hand to attack. I played rook h4 just to make him just to gain a bit of time on the clock. So pawn at h5 and pawn at f6. You can see my moves were not the very best. That certainly pawn f6 I could play better than that. But fortunately my bishop g7 was a winner. Where even though it might seem a bit weird to just keep giving up a pawn's worth material a couple of times, it actually does make sense to trade off their defenders. Because now with a knight in hand I can get some ammunition, and now bishop h5 is coming to just bring my queen into the attack with tempo. In fact, I was expecting he might try and block with something on h6, which at least would get me thinking a bit more, because my opponent does still have nearly twice as much time as I do. But after gh5, queen h5, well, now I can even pre-move knight g5, because I was pretty sure he would block on h6. I mean, it's true, maybe in hindsight I should probably go queen h6 and, just get his queen off the board, because I mean, I could certainly go knight g4, pre-move queen f6 or queen h6, and, it's pretty easy to be able to execute the checkmate from there with a queen, two bishops, and three pawns in hand is, easily more than enough. But fortunately, knight at g5 was not a bad pre-move, because I can still use my bag of tricks, h7. And okay, after knight takes f7, it's true that I missed the idea of h8 equals queen and deflecting the queen. But the nice thing about knight f7 is I could play it very, very quickly, and still I have way more attackers than he has defenders. And then after knight at f6, I was expecting him to take the pawn for what it's worth. But I saw that now I can play h8 equals queen, because at this point, I mean, I can pre-move queen at f7, because even if he takes my queen, I still have one in hand for mate. And after bishop at g8 and queen f7, well, I have mate next move with captures and queen f7. So black resigned in this position. So as you can see, yeah, this game was quite an instructive one, I think, where despite having a rough beginning, I was able to outplay my opponent later, where he kind of didn't really show enough respect for his king safety, and I was able to attack his dark squares to win pretty convincingly. So let's see how the next game I played went, where, it was a little bit random, to play at 2-250 and then to, play at 1400. But let's have a look at it anyway, so you can see how to beat, let's say, relatively inexperienced Crazyhouse players as well. Actually, I think in this game I might have blundered, because I think I gave him the opportunity to force a checkmate that he didn't take advantage of, where I kind of gambled a little bit that he wouldn't see it in bullet. So the game went e4, knight f6, and yeah, here I played a bit too quickly. I pre-moved d5 thinking he would surely play some move to defend the pawn. But say he played d4 and had a funny thing like what happened to my previous opponent, where instead of taking the free pawn and, even having it is potentially going for knight f2 after trading some more pieces. Because obviously you don't want to play knight f2 just for the sake of it. You want to wait until there's some value there. But after d5, yeah, he went e5, and now he gets this very good position by transposition. And after knight e4, yeah, I was sort of gambling he wouldn't play f3, but he did, and well, the result is that he actually ended up playing the opening in pretty much the best way by accident with a transposition. After knight c6, I was kind of surprised he didn't play the move f takes e4. I mean, black does have some partial compensation where you can try to play on the light squares, but realistically it shouldn't be anywhere near enough. Especially if white plays bishop b5, which it's often a very good idea to pin the knight in Crazyhouse, because you never know when it's going to be useful to take that knight and, be able to drop the knight on some other part of the board, like h5 is often a good square after e6 has been played, or especially after the bishop on f8 has moved away. In fact, it's probably even better to play bishop b5 first, because the knight is not really going anywhere and it just reduces black's options. But anyway, instead my opponent played bishop d3, which I was pretty happy to see. I mean, yeah, the computer mentions bishop f5 as being a nice move, where you can sort of sack the knight, but be able to gain tempo on the bishop, which is handy. But okay, I played knight d4 and went for a more open position, figuring that my opponent would probably struggle a lot more to deal with the complications without much time on the clock. But he played bishop e4, which was quite shocking. I thought he would simply take, and I mean, with an extra piece, white should still be much better here for sure, but at least I can try to make a bit sort of complex The idea of pawn f5 is a nice one, actually, where the idea is just to force their bishop off the diagonal. And, if bishop d3, e6, I mean, white is definitely still much better, but at least your open white king gives black some practical chances in a bullet game. Well, instead he played bishop e4, and yeah, now everything kind of comes together. Where actually, yeah, funnily enough, the computer likes my move of bishop g4, because I thought it was actually a blunder at the time, because after queen g4, this is actually what happened in the game. And after king e2, I thought, well, probably knight a1 is the move that's a blunder, where in reality I should just go bishop d1 and just take, but I didn't think he was going to play king e2 because it was like the worst legal move on the board. But after knight a1, I think he can actually win with d7, because I thought this was just a forced mate that he had, takes, and, knight at c5, queen at d7, and, it's just a forced mate. Well, the computer points out that, yeah, you can even do it faster with bishop at d7, because obviously, yeah, you've got, like, queen at b5 and, queen d5 mate. So, yeah, if he had found this, yeah, I would have lost to, a very low-rate player, and it would have been very embarrassing. Luckily for me, I got away with it. My opponent didn't see that, where he played like was normal chess. And the result was I was able to bring the bishop in, and yeah, b5 would have been better to cover the c4 square, but this is still fine. And after king e1, yeah, I was able to force mate with rook e2, then queen at d1, knight e1, and yeah, I thought he would play a knight at e1, so that's why I saw a knight I just took with the rook without thinking. Exactly what I would have done if he had played, knight at e1, then I would have just taken the material and, just without thinking. But okay, fortunately, this is still dead one, and I figured, yeah, I'd probably have a forced mate, but if I just take the queen, it's going to be dead one anyway, because I have, queen, knight, and 2 pawns is just beautiful attacking material. I pre-moved the move knight d3, which is why I didn't play the faster checkmate, but luckily it's still easily winning anyway, and yeah, just had a mate like this. So a pretty straightforward game, although the one blunder I made still kind of annoys me a bit, that I didn't, play with a little more care. So I kind of, didn't take my opponent seriously enough, and it could have cost me, but fortunately it didn't. And the final game of mine in this tournament was this one against Satura, my toughest opponent on rating, with a rating of, 2376 here. However, it ended up actually working out quite well this game, where I was able to just pile up lots of pressure in it. So weird, but didn't feel like I was playing a high-rated player in this game. I just felt like I was just keeping up the pressure very well. So let's see how the game went. It went e4, e5. Because I remember Jan Lee used to play this quite a lot in Crazyhouse. So I played the move knight c3. Like, I kind of have this as a semi-pre-move. Like, if they play knight e5, play e5. Because the move I would play against knight f6, it's not the worst move against d5. And I mean, against e5, I like to play the Italian, but I like to play it like this if I have more time on the clock. But I like to play it with knight c3 anyway. So it's kind of like, or more precisely, bishop c5, then knight c3. Because if knight f6, I might have had knight g5 to, get an improved 2 knights. But yeah, I mean, if you're going to play knight c3 anyway, then you can kind of do this first, and you're not really paying much of a price for it. So I went knight c6, I went knight f3. He played d6, and yeah, with more time on the clock, I would probably go d4 instead. I think that's a little more precise than bishop c4. But I kind of like semi-pre-move bishop. Well, I actually pre-moved bishop to c4, thinking, okay, I may as well play the moves that I know are good right away. Because now, yeah, with the bishop on e7, there's quite a respectable type of position for black if white doesn't, come up with some very direct plan. So I decided to play d4 and just open up the position, having seen, Jasugi and Opperwezen do similar things in their games. So after takes, this is quite a theoretical position, actually. I was expecting that he would take and, try to make something of this, like a move like bishop f6 is, at least trying to create counterplay. You can try to put an h4, pawn h3. And white would have to be very precise to deal with that. But it seems like queen e5 is probably the right move to, threaten mate, so you don't have time for the pawn here. But black's position, I think, yeah, is actually quite playable. And I'd be quite happy to play this from black shoes as well, I think, with the idea of putting the pawn h3 as the engine points out. So, actually, yeah, this idea of putting the bishop on f1, yeah, it allows pawn f3 though. That's why you should put on e2 instead. But, this is something that probably should be covered in a separate video, in fact, because I'm going a little bit off topic. In any case, in the game, my opponent played the move of knight to e5, and, well, with knight e5, yeah, I kind of didn't really know the theory. I mean, it's, I guess, worth seeing the computer pointing out some very nice attacking ideas in this position. I mean, the idea of putting the pawn at e6, I mean, that's a really juicy square if that works. I mean, if knight c4... I'm trying to understand what the idea is after takes. I'm guessing it's just putting a pawn at e6, but... Okay, so let's go queen h5. And I think the point is to go for like queen d5 and go for a fork, but the computer seems to think after king f8 that white has nothing, and that was my conclusion as well, that this attack is probably not sufficient for white. You know, pawn at h6, yeah, bishop at f6 is like seems like a pretty good defense. You know, you can just defend with your extra pieces, just covering all the dark squares and, you know, kicking the queen with the bishop at a good moment. So if you're going to play this, yeah, probably queen h5 is a better move order instead. I mean, the line, yeah, it feels like a very computerish line, but, you know, maybe this is the right way to play it. You know, after bishop at g6, for example, then, yeah, you can play bishop takes, and, yeah, the idea of queen takes is a very interesting idea, like, to sack the queen, but in return get a very good grip over the light squares. We can go, like, pawn at f5, take something on g6, e6. It's something that probably should be analysed more deeply to make this work. I feel like in a human perspective, like takes and, you know, pawn f4 or pawn e6 is a bit more natural in comparison. Because there are actually quite a few sort of not natural moves that white can play. Like, pawn at f4, like, to me seems like a very logical choice. And, you know, knight a6, pawn at e6, it's a very clear, you know, light squared strategy where, I mean, if king f8, you can use the fact they put the knight here by going, like, takes. And, I mean, I would have thought knight f7 would be the move, but I guess black can sack the queen to protect the king. So kind of keeping it in reserve and having knight f7 as an idea you play a bit later is probably, yeah, the way to prove a biggest advantage. Okay, I've learned quite a lot from this analysis, actually, because I didn't really know how to deal with knight e5, but after this, I think I'll play bishop f7 and this pawn at f4 idea next time. It just seems very easy to attack as white and not so easy for black to defend. Well, I played the move bishop b3, which is a very human move, but probably not the best one. Because as soon as I played, I thought, yeah, he just puts the pawn at c4 and black is quite healthy. Well, he played the move bishop g4, which, yeah, I think was a big mistake, actually. Although I didn't really punish it in the game. I think he should go knight f6, and, you know, I can certainly try to attack him. You know, a move like pawn at e6 looks very natural, but, yeah, maybe, you know, this idea of playing pawn at f4 that's been played, pawn to f4, that's been played in some games might be a better try, like going knight eg4 and then e6 ideas. That a computer seems to think that after castles that the white king might be a bit too open. Because I'm always very reluctant to play these moves like f4 and open up your king, but, you know, maybe black's not really in a position to take advantage. Definitely something that can be explored, but I guess otherwise you can simply castle and, you know, if h3, like just take and pawn at g2 seems relatively safe, and otherwise you can put the pawn at e6, and yeah, I guess that can also be explored, or, you know, pawn at h6 definitely. It's very natural when they castle. Like, this is a typical thematic idea. As soon as they castle, like, put a pawn at h6, or if you're black, put a pawn at h3, and just, you know, open up their king in the long term is typically a good plan. So, in any case, he played bishop g4, and yeah, I did admittedly not consider the idea of playing bishop f7 and, you know, sacrificing the queen, but getting the black king very opened up. Because in a position like this, I mean, it's very hard just to stop the knight coming into e6. And then when you get that queen out, it will give you mating material. So a very instructive point of how I could have played the game better. Because I kind of sensed instinctively that f3 is probably not the best move, but it just sort of felt like a move I could play without thinking as such. Because he doesn't really have the ammunition to play like pawn at f2, because I just take and, you know, they don't really have a knight to drop to g4 or something. So that's bishop h5, yeah. I was very surprised to see this move, because pawn e6 is just so juicy at this moment. Although the computer, yeah, prefers other moves, but it's very fun to try and weaken them in this way. After pawn at c4, which I kind of half expected, I decided to just go takes and, you know, just keep dropping stuff. Like, it's very natural to build up the momentum in this way, because I didn't really see a great way for him to deal with it. Like, if he moves the bishop, I was just going to take and, you know, just keep trading pieces in order to kind of weaken him on the king side. You know, he should play king f8, but, like, even if I just keep the pawn there, it's kind of a thorn in his side. In the game, in reality, I probably would have just taken and, you know, got the knight in hand, and, you know, I can go knight d5, take the bishop, and then try to hit him on his weak dark light squares. Feels like this should just be winning for white here. But because my king is also perfectly safe for that matter. These pawns do a good job of covering the light squares. So after c takes b3, well, I was very surprised to see this move actually. Because now after a b3, my rook is coming in the attack for free, which maybe doesn't do that much, but certainly quite nice. You know, I played a b3 as a pre-move because I thought he would take with the knight. After d7, I decided to be practical and just start taking his pieces. So bishop at d5, bishop b7, and, you know, it just is good to have the pawn in hand to be able to attack on those light squares again. And that's why after rook here, I decided to play rook takes a7, realizing that objectively it's probably not the strongest move, but that practically it gives me like 2 pawns to just keep throwing stuff at his king, and it would be very hard for him to defend. Objectively, the better move is to play f4, because I actually have 2 pawns in hand already, so it means I can kind of go for like f5 and get this attack going without needing to sacrifice the rook. But anyway, the game saw rook a7, bishop at b6. So keep in mind, my opponent's actually been playing faster than me so far. So it means I kind of need to make some attack happen very quickly in order to win. So pawn f5 was kind of my way of realizing that, okay, objectively my position is not so good, but I can at least take and, get some attacking chances where he has to defend quite precisely. I mean, yeah, you should just take the rook and, after takes. I mean, black doesn't really have anything in this position, or white doesn't have anything really in this position. Yeah, even moves like rook at g4 and pawn f2 are tactics that I admittedly had not considered whatsoever, but it does look pretty strong with, bishop h4 being a good intermezzo to clear some space for the king and, then to get in like a rook g1 and, this is, going to be pretty nasty when black gets an extra queen and I don't really have a mating attack to make up for it. So, yeah, that would have been winning, but luckily for me, he assumed I was going to move the rook without thinking and therefore I was able to punish his bad pre-move. I should have played queen d4 directly, but I thought, okay, let's just take, and, I just did this to have some more pieces in hand. After knight c6, I decided to take, and, I think my queen c4 move was a very precise move, because it's very nice to have the pin to keep up the pressure against the weak light squares. Again, remember I said before about focusing your play on one color complex, and that's what I made sure to do in this game to good effect. So I played pawn at f5, and I thought that he was going to put a pawn on d7, and then I was just going to put the bishop on h3 and just keep up the attack, like knight f4, and, I can just pile up the pressure. And, once that falls, I just am going to flood in with the attack on the light squares with the extra piece I'm going to get with exchanges. Bishop at c8, I can even play like knight f4 is, probably the move I would have played then. Just, just crashing through on this color complex. Because black doesn't have a good enough defenders. If he does try to defend, I can, like, just keep trading everything. Like, if rook at f6, I could... Well, I can even play pawn at g5 then and, just win the rook. So, it's just bad for black all around. So after king f8, well, now we get to the phase where I just finished him off with some tactics. fe6, bishop at b5. Kind of a bit surprised by that because I thought, well, it's kind of good to have the bishop in hand. And I think he just missed the move knight at d7 with king e8, bishop f7, mate. And then the rest is just sort of tactics, knight at e5. And yeah, I played queen takes b5 just to, prepare queen e8 checkmate. And he doesn't really have a good defense to it. After rook b8, queen e8, that was the end of the game. So yeah, from that you can see that I had a very good Crazyhouse session that, I actually played better when I wasn't listening to music. But what might be some lessons that you can take away from this video in order to play better Crazyhouse chess yourself? Well, I guess this one game I played actually has a lot of the lessons in it, both what to do and what not to do. The first point I would say is in Crazyhouse, I think of it as where the initiative is much more valuable in Crazyhouse than it is in normal chess. What that means is that, like, having the threats against the king and the king's safety is really much more important than almost anything else, like even more important than material in a lot of cases. At the same time, you do need the pieces in hand to be able to make the attack work. So it's very important to think about, okay, what pieces do I actually need to kind of, build up the attack? It's always kind of like so obvious to me, I don't really think of it anymore, but an example would be like, let's say, if we take this game for example, I mean, think, well, what piece does white need for the attack? Well, if it was white's move, you want to play takes and put a pawn at e6, but then what would you need as a follow-up after that? Well, it would be good to have a knight on f7, so be able to trade that knight and then put the knight in would be nice. Or you might need a pawn, and you can then think in those terms of how to build up the attack. And also, another really important tip is it's good to think in terms of color complexes, where you might notice in this game I really piled everything on the light squares. Once I have the bishop on c4, it's very natural to go after f7 before my opponent is able to castle short. And I was able to use that to good effect to win. And you also see these patterns like with the dark squares, like we saw this variation where if black does castle, then it's very natural like to put a pawn at h6. That's just a very typical way to open up their king, and you see black will put a pawn at h3, and that's sort of you go after g2 and g7 if they castle short in the majority of cases. We have a few possible exceptions, but this is the general idea that will help you to win a lot of games and be able to just put a lot of pressure very quickly against your opponents. Now, also, of course, in Crazyhouse, it does help to be able to calculate very well, where certainly being able to calculate the checkmates to finish them off is very important. And also, the best thing is just to play a lot of Crazyhouse. Like, as you get more and more experience, you get a better feel of when, like, some sacrifice intuitively is going to give you, if not mate, at least very good attacking chances, and when the sacrifice is not going to really be working, and when you can sort of defend and put pieces on the board. And yeah, I guess to find, like, more advanced tip would be, like, when it comes to having the pieces, like, on the board versus the pieces, like, sort of in your hand. Like, with white having a pawn in the hand. Like, in this position, for example, like, say if we And I say if like black plays knight f6, just for argument's sake, I mean, it wouldn't make sense to put a pawn on h3 purely for defensive value. It's much better to go for the attack and put the pawn on h6 instead. And in terms of like how much pieces you should have like in your hand versus on the board, like if you have a material advantage, it's often great to actually try and put some of those pieces on the board just to maybe make use that material advantage more directly. Well, I remember I did that to good effect in the game against that 2-2-50 player, where, you know, I was up material, but I actually need to put that material on the board to finish off the king. And you saw I was able to like actually trade off his defenders using the extra material, so I could then drop the piece on the board with tempo and then just finish them off in that way. So that would be, yeah, I guess the other tip I would have. I mean, if I thought about it for a bit longer, I could probably think of a lot more, but those are, I'd say, the main ones that are sort of important to keep in mind. And I'll say, like, in terms of opening knowledge, like, if you sort of just watch what strong players play and just copy them, you really can't go too far wrong. Because, I mean, the Crazyhouse is so complex that what the engine says is really not going to matter all that much in general. Like, +2 is not that significant even at the top levels. So that being said, yeah, I hope you really enjoyed my video on how to win at Crazyhouse. Do make sure to like the video, and if you enjoyed it, to subscribe and show your support. It helps me to make more quality chess content for you. So that being said, well, congratulations on getting through this whole video, and I will see you in the next video, chess champions.